Today, I wanted to make a video really talking straight to people managers and leaders in organizations. I had a conversation just last week with a leader who was telling me that he was noticing some behaviors within his team that he wanted to start changing. He had been noticing that people were sending emails late at night, people were responding to emails early in the morning. So we started really talking through what were some of his intentions behind wanting to change these bad habits and how these bad habits might be impacting those individuals as well as maybe everybody else on the team. One of the things that I asked him was, what is your responsibility in those bad habits? Um, so that got onto a different kind of conversation, which surrounded around what could you as a leader, if you're noticing within your teams, if you have people managers on your teams, if you have employees on your teams, what are some of the things that you might be doing that might be enabling those bad habits of people on your team? And what are some of the things that you can do to personally fix that? One of the things we talked about was setting rules of engagement for the organization. When should we be expected to respond to emails, and when shouldn't we be expected to respond to emails? And also, what are some of the things that you can do as a people manager to enable them in better ways? So, one of the things we talked about was, what if it's not an emergency? Could that email or that instant message have waited until the next day? We know that individual John has an issue with checking his email all night long and getting up really early and responding to that. What would happen if you just didn't send that email and waited until the office hours? Let's say the rules of engagement were between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Could it have waited for you to send that email when we know that John starts his workday? So, are we creating burdens for other people and enabling their bad habits with decisions that we're making? And one of the things that I loved about this leader was that he noticed and he paused and he reflected and he said, I sent an email out this morning and I noticed that John responded within 5 minutes and it was 6 a.m. in the morning. Now, I don't have the expectation that he's going to respond to that email, but I know John has a habit of doing that. So, how can we come up with ways that people can enable one another to influence them in a positive way versus in a negative way? And one thing that this executive that I was speaking to talked about was, I like to send things in the moment because I'll forget. So that a conversation quickly pivoted with us between, how can you enable John to not reinforce these bad habits, to what can you do to support John to reinforce better habits? So we talked about things like, I do really well with reminders. So maybe I can set a reminder in my calendar, or I can send myself an email so that when I log on tomorrow, I can say, okay, I'm not going to send this to John until I know he's on the computer at 7 a.m. So just little things like that, I think, can go a really long way for us as leaders, as people managers, as just fellow human beings, to come up with ways that we can support one another and enable each other in a positive way versus reinforcing negative or potentially bad habits. How can you enable people in a more positive way? Whether you're a people manager, whether you're a leader of a large organization, are there things that you might be doing that might be enabling bad habits within your team? I think rules of engagement are super important and critical to the organization, but how are we going to follow through? And understanding that just because somebody has a bad habit, that means you don't have any influence on that. It means that you have some responsibility to say, what can I do to help support you so that we can form a new habit, so that we can keep ourselves accountable to these rules of engagement that we want to set up, and figure out ways that you can help start influencing John in a much better and more productive way versus always coming back to the argument of, I don't understand why we have so many bad habits and how can we fix it? One way to fix it is just by stopping, reflecting, and noticing how you might be engaging with people that might be influencing those bad habits. If we just take a moment to do some of those small things, I think we can have a tremendous impact on the organization and people that we interact with and lead on a daily basis.